Howdy Internet! In this video, actually in this series of three videos, we are going to be creating an Android app from scratch. We're going to be using the Kotlin programming language, and you don't have to have used the Kotlin programming language before, because as long as you've used a programming language before, you should be fine. If you're an absolute beginner to programming, this might not be the tutorial for you, because I don't go over things like what is a variable, so on and so forth. So ideally you would have some programming knowledge. Then again, you can follow along if you haven't, because we will be going step by step. But this is really aimed for people who are beginners to Android development. So like I say, we're going to have 3 videos. In the first video, we're going to go over the basics of what an Android app actually is. We're going to go over things like how do we actually get it onto a phone, or how do we get it onto an emulated phone. So we're going to create one of those on the old computer, and then we're going to create our very first page of an app that's going to say some stuff. In the second video, we're going to take what we learned from the first video and we're going to build on top of it. So we're going to take the view or the activity that we create in the first video, and we're going to have it linked to a second activity, essentially a second screen. And we're going to have them be able to talk to each other, and the user can switch between them and so on and so forth. And in the third video, we're going to make some improvements to it. We're going to make it look nice and pretty, so on and so forth. I also should mention what the app we're actually going to make is. It's going to be a yoga timer. I thought it's the simplest thing we can really make as beginners. That's going to introduce you to the concepts you need to know. For example, what is an activity, what is an intent, and so on and so forth. These are things we're going to be going over in the videos to follow. And what the app actually is going to do is it's going to allow a user to specify a time, and what's going to happen is that time is going to loop over. So let's say they say 5 seconds, it's going to go count down from 5 to 0, and then it's going to go back up to 5 again until they tell it to stop. And the idea behind that is that they could do their little yoga exercises or whatever. So they'll stretch for 10 seconds or whatever, and then they'll hear a little ping from the application, which will tell them you need to change the stretch you're doing. So that's the basic idea of the app. So I've been rambling long enough. Let's get to some code.
Ha ha! Sharad you are! It's time to get down to some coding. But first, you're probably going to want to download Android Studio. This is the IDE of choice for creating Android apps. Now I'm going to assume if you are interested in creating your own Android apps, you probably know how to install a program. So go ahead and install Android Studio on your machine of choice, and then come back to the video. Okay, now I'm going to assume you've already done that. So what I've done now, opened Android Studio, clicked on Create a New Project, and we're going to create a new project. Now we can pick from many of these activities. It doesn't really matter what we pick, but for our example, we're going to be picking basic activity. We can always change this later and do different things with it, but we're going to be picking basic application. So pick that and give your application a name. I'm going to be giving mine the name Yoga Timer. I put Yogi, I don't know why I've typed that. Yoga Timer, and I put Yoga. Good God. Stop watching and I'll be able to type properly. You can never type properly when someone's watching. That's a fact of life. Right, and we'll do an example like that. So Yoga Timer example, we are going to be using the language Kotlin. You could use Java if you wanted. Really isn't going to make much of a difference. If you really want to follow along with the video, I just use Kotlin because the syntax is ever so slightly different. So you can also pick something called the API level. So if we were to pick a newer version, so we could pick Android 10, the problem with that is that we would have less potential users for our app, but we would have the latest and greatest features. I'm just going to keep it with API 15. Android ice cream sandwich. Now, this will tell you, Android will tell you, your app will run on approximately 100% of devices. So if we went all the way to Q, it will run on less than 1% of devices. So just something to be aware of if you're creating a production application. This is just for a little bit of fun, so I'm just going to stick with ice cream sandwich because we don't need anything too complex. So go ahead, click finish. It's going to do some stuff, start building your application, and oh my god, here we go. It's doing it. I might skip this bit of the video because it might get very boring as it does some processing. Okay, that has all built nicely. We can now see that we have some XML in the center. We have our little preview of our application at the moment, which has all just been built for us. We haven't needed to do anything about that. And now we have everything ready. So, first thing we're going to need to do is create a virtual device. The reason we need to create a virtual device is so that we can actually build the application on what it would be to the computer, a phone, an emulated phone. You don't necessarily need to do this though. If you do have your own Android device, you can plug it in and use that as your target build device, and it will work on your phone. You can play around with it in real life with your hands, your thumbs. You can press the buttons that you've created in your app. But if you do want to follow along with the tutorial and keep it as close to what I'm doing as possible, then we're going to create a virtual device. I'm currently using the Nexus 5 for my virtual device for no particular reason. So if we go up to the top of the IDE, where mine says Nexus 5, yours will say something slightly different. Click the down arrow, click Open AVD Manager. You're going to have this little window open up for you. This will have nothing in it. We're going to go ahead and click Create a Virtual Device. And there are a number of ones we can choose from. We could pick, for example, the Pixel XL. We could pick the Pixel 3, the Nexus S, the Nexus 1, so on and so forth. We're going to pick the Nexus 5 purely for the reason that is the one I'm using. Click Next. Now we're going to pick the actual system image that we want to put onto this device. So in this case, I'm using Android Pie. So you'll need to download it if it's not already on your computer. So luckily, we can just click download and it will download our version. I don't need to do this because it's already there. So you'll need to download it, wait for it to download, then you'll be able to select Android Pie and that'll be fine. And then we can just click next. It'll give it a little name. There's nothing else I really want to change over here. We click finish and then we'll create our little virtual device. So once you've got all that sorted, we are good to go. So now we can build our application. For you, there will be a little play button up here, but I've just skipped ahead and built the application because it can take a little bit of time. And what will come up is we'll come up with this little emulator that looks like a real phone. Wow, look at this. And at the moment, we've got a little title. We've got this little button here that does nothing in particular. And we have a thing that says, Hello World! And we also have a button. And that does nothing at the moment either. So we've now got our first application working. Let's make some changes to it so we can have our little app work. So coming back over to our IDE, let's have a look at first changing this icon because this icon is an email icon and we don't need that. So let's go ahead and do that. So looking at Android, what we have here, and I haven't really explained the package structure that we have. At the moment we have a folder called Java. Now I know we're using Kotlin, but it doesn't really matter. It's called Java. It's going to be called Java like that. And in there we have a main package that has our main activity. And that's this Kotlin file up here, which we'll come to in a bit. And then we have some test files here that we're going to ignore for the purposes of these 3 videos, just to keep things nice and simple. We also have a res folder, stands for resources, and in here we have a series of folders that we can look at. So we have drawables. These are things like our app icon and any other icons that we have in the application. We have our layout. So these are XML files here, like this content main, and this is because Android uses something called the model view model pattern to design the application, sort of an application pattern built into Android. So we define how our view looks in these XML files. And we have a menu which has our settings menu up here that we looked at a minute ago. And we have something called the map folder, which contains the actual icons that we would see on the launch page of the home screen of an Android device. So we click on that, we can see we've got a little icon there that we could swap out if we wanted to. Just a note here that the drawable app folder contains typically more of the icons that we would see within the application. Values, this folder contains things like our strings XML. So this is a way we can define the strings that we use in our application in one central place. The reason we would do something like this is because maybe we want to say we want to have our application used in many different countries, and many different countries obviously have many different languages. So what we could do is we could switch out this file for, say, a French file, and maybe this will become le yoga timer example, because my French is really good. And it would still be referenced by the application logic as app name. So that's something that we could do is quite well. So that's the sort of things that are contained in the values file. We're not really going to concern ourselves too much with that sort of stuff, because we're just going to keep things nice and simple for this example. So let's go ahead and, like I say, change that application after that little aside. What we need to do is we go to the drawable folder, and we're going to right click, click new, come all the way down to vector asset, and we come up with this little pop-up window here. So we're going to give it a name. I'm going to say IC clock, because I'm going to pick like a clock example. I also want it to be white here, so we can go all the way up to here, choose white, click on the clip art button, and we will see, oh my god, look at how many icons we have inbuilt into Android. So we could pick the alarm, for example. We could pick the alarm off. We could pick many of these things. They're all built in. We get them for free, gratis. Now, the one I want to use is called Access Time. No particular reason. I just seem to like this one. So we'll pick that one. It's giving it a new name, actually. So I'm just going to switch that out. And we will click Next. Stick it in the drawable folder. Click Finish. And look at that. We've now got that icon there. Great. Now, the question is, how do we switch it out of this button? Well, the way we do that is we go over to our layout folder, which we could also just click the target icon because we're already in the content main, look for activity main, and we can see here we have this whole XML which defines what's going off in the actual activity itself. And we have this floating action button. This is a floating action button. So if I click on this XML, it shows up over here. There we go. We can click on the action button here. And we have this little line here which defines the drawable that we are using as the icon. So in this case, we can just switch it out and we can say access time white 24 dp, like that. And what we need to do next is just take out this Android bit here. So we're referencing specifically our drawable folder. And you may have just seen, if you have eagle eyes, that our app icon just changed. Brilliant. So now that's all working. We've changed our actual button and it's got a new icon. Cool. There's something I also should point out here, because if you don't want to work with the XML directly, there's a little tab we can click here called Design. This is more useful if we wanted to, say, just drag and drop things. So we could say, oh, let's throw a button, and we can drag a button onto our layout. In this case, we're using what's known as a constraint layout. This is a way of defining where things will be on the screen. In Android, this is sort of the preferred way of doing things at the moment. They're quite nice to use. We'll get into a little bit more of that as we move on throughout these videos. So let's now go ahead and add a little input so that our users can put in a number of seconds that they would like to do their little yoga stretches for. So move over to content_main.xml, like that. We can either use the XML to do this, or we can use the design tab. I'm going to use the design tab, but we're going to delete this text view that says hello world at the moment. Like so. It's gone. We are now going to click design like this. We are going to search for something called edit text. So we're going to look along here. We can also click the little search at the top, look for edit text, and I want the number one. So we want, because it's going to be a number that we're going to put in here. We'll drag that to the middle like this. There we go. And we can give it an ID. So in this case, I want to give it the ID seconds. We can also give it a constraint. So what we want to do with the constraint, so this is that constraint layout I was talking, we want to sort of say, I want to constrain it to the top, the sides, and all the bottom and all the sides so that it pushes it into the middle. The way we can do that is we can drag from here, from these little circles to the top, and now it's constrained to the top. If we do the same with the bottom, it's going to force it into the middle. Do the same with the sides just to be sure, even though it should stay in the middle, like that. And now it's forced into the middle. Okay. We've got this input type as a number, which means that when the user clicks on it, instead of bringing up your standard keyboard, your QWERTY keyboard, it's going to bring up just the numbers. So just to make things a little bit easier, so there's no errors with what the user actually puts in here. Let's make the text size a little bit bigger. We're going to make it, I don't know, 36 SP. Maybe that's too big. I don't know. We'll soon find out. Okay. So we've got that little constraint layout sorted. Let us have a gander at what this looks like when we rebuild our application, and we'll see that when it pops up, we can actually enter some information into that file, into the input, should I say, and it's just going to bring up that number thing. So I'm going to quickly have a look, see if that is working. Okay, it's brought it up, fine. We'll click on this, and look at that, it's brought up the number keypad here. If we click on 2, for example, we could just click the tick, and we could click this button, and nothing happens yet. So there's the slight thing we want to do. Maybe we want to center this a little bit better, so we can go ahead and do that now. Let's come back to the design of this, and what we can do is find gravity. We don't want to center vertical, we want to center just completely. So now that will be in the middle. Okay, so if we quickly give it a little rerun again just to check that that is now centered. So go back to our little emulator. If we have a look, and oh look, we can see our number is centered. Great. Now maybe we want to actually do something with this button. So what we're actually going to use this button for is we're going to use it to create a new view in the next video. But for this video, we are going to just get the number that the user's entered, and we're just going to print it to the console just so we can see how that works. So go to your main activity.kt file, and we can see we have a few methods that have been created for us. So we have this thing here. This is fab on click listener, and then it has a little thing that occurs, and this is what creates a little snack bar. So if we have a look, when we click this button, there's going to be a little thing that shows up at the bottom of the screen here. That's called a snack bar. Now we can do something with that, or we can just get rid of it. I'm electing at the moment that we just get rid of it. We don't actually need to do anything with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own little function. It's going to be a private function, and we're going to call it parse seconds, like this. It's going to return a long, and what we're going to do is we're going to say if seconds question mark dot text is not equal to null, and the seconds is that ID we gave our element earlier. So if we can just import that and get rid of that red. Then what we want to do is we want to return seconds text to string and then to long, like that. Now the reason this question mark exists here, if you're new to Kotlin, is basically we're saying that this may or may not exist. So if seconds didn't exist, what would typically happen if we did this is that when we call .text, it would throw a null pointer exception, and it would crash unless we had a try catch block. But this is a really elegant way of saying this might be empty itself. So if seconds is empty, then the call to text is not going to throw a wobbly and break the application. It's just going to say, yeah, that's not there. So that's something just to be aware of with Android, with Kotlin, should I say. Then we're checking, okay, as long as this text here isn't null, right, then we want to get from that, we want to get the string that is present and we want to convert it to a long and return that to the user. Another thing we also want to do is just say return 0 in case something's gone wrong. We could perhaps do something better than return 0 if for whatever reason there's something's gone wrong here. But for this, we're just going to return 0. So let's get rid of this on snack bar thing here. So what we can see here is we've got this on-click listener that basically passes a lambda in, and what we're going to do here is we are going to get our seconds that the user's entered, and we're just going to print them. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to type in print line like that, and then we're going to call parse seconds. So we've called that a little function we just created, and what that function does is it calls to our element, our input text that we created earlier, gets the text, gets the string, converts it to a long, and returns it. So when we print the line, what we're expecting to see is that in the console, we will see the number that we enter. So if we click on the console here, we can see that we actually have some stuff showing up, but nothing interesting at the moment. Click on our emulator again, or if it's on your real device, it'll be on your real device. Type in anything you like, any number, like that. So we can type in 10, click the plus, and click our little button. And what we're expecting is down here, we're going to see the number 10 show up. And there we go, it has shown up like that, and it's shown up twice because I clicked the button twice, so if I click it again, it will show up again. Great, so in this video we've started off by creating the bare basics of an Android application. In the next video we will be taking this, what we've created, and creating an application that actually has some functionality and works. And then in the final video in the series, we'll be making it look a little bit pretty. So thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to see the next video. If you have any questions, leave them down below and I will try and answer them as soon as possible. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.